technically, from a legal point of view, every aspect of the environment is protected to the extent that there are laws in place aimed at protecting those resources or those sectors. But when one looks at the implementation of these different high-sounding good laws, then one gets to note that, in fact, the protection varies in degrees, depending on the prioritization of the areas of the environment that are protected, and also the social and economic priorities of the government. We are in a developmental state, and our foremost objective is to deliver on jobs, to deliver on poverty alleviation. And a number of the laws that we have in place that technically protect some aspects of the environment are actually viewed as obstacles in the way of this developmental agenda. When matters come to enforcement, it means that there is a failure somewhere. There has been non-compliance. And for me, enforcement, while it might be able to achieve the objectives of environmental law, is way too late. It goes against the preventative principle, or the principle of prevention. We must prevent damage first. We must prevent pollution first. And to do that, we must promote compliance. If we are able to promote compliance, then enforcement might not be necessary at all. And the unfortunate situation is that in South Africa, most of our enforcement happens through the criminal law, which is aimed at just punishing the offender and not necessarily rectifying the damage that is done to the environment. I'll give an example of rhino poaching, for instance. There is no point in imposing a heavy fine on a rhino poacher. The rhino might be dead. In most cases, it's dead anyway. And you have lost a resource. And I think laws must focus better on conserving the rhino. If we can achieve compliance with our biodiversity and wildlife laws so that the rhino is in the first place not poached because there is compliance and the poachers do not see any value in poaching, then you don't need to waste resources in enforcement. Alternatively, if we are going to be working on enforcement, which is also one of the weakest areas of our laws, is that we need to improve on the mechanisms that we use to enforce environmental laws. And we need to shift from criminal laws. They must become an enforcement tool of last resort, and we must focus on enforcement mechanisms that actually make the violators feel the pinch, as well as achieve the objective of environmental regulation, which is to prevent pollution and environmental degradation. The only sure way of encouraging compliance is to make it worthwhile to the regulated and to the general public. So that's one of the ways of ensuring compliance, by creating incentives into the law. This could be economic incentives, financial incentives. This could also be regulatory incentives. So for instance, if someone is importing renewable energy technology, they must not pay import duties, for instance. They must import the technology duty-free, because they are actually assisting the country in reducing its greenhouse gas emissions from coal-fired power plants. Alternatively, we can also give tax rebates and put in place a system of green reporting. Right now, the JSE is moving towards sustainability reporting. Companies must report on what are they doing to promote sustainable development, to be sustainable. Those are the kinds of incentives that we must build into big corporations, the private sector, for them to see the value of compliance. If it's going to affect their share value, I mean, as night follows day, you are going to see that the private sector is going to actually try to take steps to comply without being enforced to comply.